Grab your things and run. Don't trust your son. I already called the police. They're on their way to your house right now. Please, Regina, just go. 7 words might have let me talk myself out of it. That whole sentence didn't. At 2:03 in the morning, Alton's voice tore me out of sleep, low and urgent. And before I could ask a single question, the line went dead in my ear. Just Alton's voice, cutting straight through my sleep. No greeting, no explanation beyond what he'd already given me. Gone before I could breathe a word back. My name is Regina Corwin, 61 years old. A widow for 3 months now, still learning how to sleep alone in a bed that used to hold 2 people. I met Alton at the grocery store 3 days before that call. A kind man, patient with an old woman still finding her footing. We talked easy, like we'd known each other longer than we had. I never asked him for anything but company. That night, he didn't sound like the man from the produce aisle. He sounded like someone bracing for something he couldn't stop. I called back once. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. It didn't. I don't know what made me listen to him so completely. Maybe it was the way his voice cracked on my son's name. Maybe it was that a man doesn't call the police on somebody's behalf over nothing. That's not the kind of thing you do for a feeling. That's the kind of thing you do when you already know something. Either way, I got up. I didn't turn on the lights. I pulled on the clothes closest to the bed, grabbed my purse, my medication, my late husband Dwayne's old flashlight from the nightstand drawer, and I left through the back door like a woman running from her own house. I didn't go far. Patrice, my neighbor of 11 years, opened her door before I even finished knocking. Regina, Lord, what happened to you? I don't know yet, I told her, and that was the truth. She didn't ask twice. She pulled me inside, locked the door behind us, and sat me down at her kitchen table like she'd been expecting trouble her whole life. If you're watching this tonight, tell me where you're tuning in from. I want to know who's sitting with me through this one. We stayed in that kitchen almost 3 hours. Patrice made tea neither of us touched. I kept checking my phone, half hoping Alton would call back and tell me I'd overreacted, that I could go home. He never did. At 5 a.m. exactly, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Alton. Mrs. Corwin? This is the Montgomery Police Department. Are you safe right now? I'm safe. What's going on? Is this about my house? A pause. The kind that makes your stomach drop before anyone says a word. Ma'am, we responded to your residence about 20 minutes ago. We apprehended 2 armed men inside your home. I gripped the edge of Patrice's table so hard my knuckles went white. 2 men, I repeated, like saying it slower might make it make sense. In my house, tonight. Yes, ma'am. We're still working to understand exactly what they were doing there. I need you to stay where you are for now. I lowered the phone from my ear. Patrice was watching me, waiting, but I couldn't find words yet. All I could think about was Alton's voice at 2 a.m., how he'd already called the police before he ever called me, how he knew to move before any of it happened, and how somewhere in the dark, 2 armed strangers had been standing in the rooms where I slept. My face must have said everything my voice couldn't, because Patrice reached across the table and took my hand without asking a single question. You always take longer picking apples than anybody I've ever seen. I looked up from the produce bin, embarrassed, like I'd been caught doing something private. A man stood a few feet away, cart half full, smiling in a way that didn't feel like flirting. More like he'd noticed me the way you notice someone lonely. I like to know what I'm getting, I said. Smart woman. He held out his hand. Alton. Regina. That was 3 days before the call that would change everything. 3 months to the day since Dwayne died. If I'm honest about the counting, I still couldn't stop myself from doing. Grief still had its hands wrapped tight around my throat. He'd been gone long enough that people stopped asking how I was doing, but not long enough that I'd stopped waiting for him to walk through the door every evening at 6. Alton didn't rush me. We talked for 20 minutes in that aisle. Nothing important, just the kind of conversation that fills up empty space. He mentioned he used to know a Dwayne Corwin years back, through a mutual friend. Said it so lightly I didn't think twice. "Good man," Alton said. I was sorry to hear. I didn't ask how he'd heard. Grief makes you grateful for company, not careful with it. Before we parted, he said something small, almost a joke. "You should get that back porch light fixed. Man could trip and hurt himself walking up on you in the dark." I laughed it off. I hadn't mentioned my porch light to him. I hadn't mentioned my porch at all. That evening, Lavelle came by unannounced, the way he'd taken to doing since his father died. He let himself in with the spare key I'd never bothered to ask back. "Ma, we need to talk about getting your affairs in order." He set a folder on my kitchen table like it was already decided. "Power of attorney." Just in case. "In case of what, Lavelle?" "I'm not sick." "You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly right now." He said it gently, the way you'd talk to a child who'd wandered into traffic. "Let me handle things. That's all I'm asking." "I raised myself long before I raised you," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I can sign my own name when I'm ready to sign something." He didn't argue. He just looked at me the way his father used to look at a debt he didn't intend to forgive. Patient. Certain he'd get his way, eventually. He left the folder on the table anyway. "Think about it," he said. "I only want to protect you." I put the folder in a drawer and didn't open it again. That night, lying in bed, my mind kept circling back to Alton, not Lavelle. Something about him had felt easy in a way I hadn't let myself feel in months. A stranger who'd known my husband's name, who made me laugh in a grocery store when nothing else had made me laugh in weeks. I told myself that's all it was. A kind man, a small coincidence, an offhand comment about a porch light. But lying there in the dark, I couldn't stop turning his words over. "You should get that back porch light fixed." I'd never told him it was broken. I'd never told him I even had one. They let me back into my own house at 8 that morning, and it didn't look like a crime scene. That was the strange part. No broken glass scattered across the floor, no drawers hanging open, no furniture flipped. Just my living room, exactly as I'd left it, except for the yellow tape across my own front door and a stranger's fingerprint dust on my doorknob. "Everything looks untouched, Mrs. Corwin," the officer said, like that should comfort me. "Nothing appears to be missing." I stood in my own hallway and felt colder than I had all night. How did they even get in? I didn't hear glass breaking, no alarm went off. And it took nearly 3 hours for someone to catch them. Why? A tall man in plain clothes introduced himself as Detective Marcus Doggett. He had a calm, careful way of talking, the kind that made you feel like he was choosing every word before it left his mouth. "We had officers watching this address since a little after 2, based on information we received," he said. "We didn't move in the moment the call came through because we needed to see who actually showed up and confirm it before we acted. Once the men were inside, that confirmed it, and we went in. I know that's a hard thing to hear. Waiting like that felt long on your end too, I'm sure. So you knew, before they even got here. We had reason to be concerned. I can't say more than that yet." He held my eyes a moment, letting that settle before moving on. "There's no sign of forced entry either. No pried locks, no broken windows. Whoever let them in either had a key, or someone with access opened the door for them." "A key? Marcus? I've only ever given a key to my son." He didn't respond to that directly, but I saw something register behind his eyes, filed away for later. "Both men have prior records." We're still working out exactly what they came here to do and how they got in. What does that mean? They broke into my house for nothing? It means we're still investigating. He said it kindly, but firmly. I know that's not the answer you want. I wanted to shake him. Instead, he handed me his card and told me to call if I remembered anything unusual. Any strangers, any arguments, anyone who might have reason to want me out of this house or access to my home. I thought of Lavelle's folder sitting in my kitchen drawer and said nothing. Lavelle arrived 20 minutes later, out of breath, like he'd run every red light in town to get to me. Ma! He pulled me into a hug so tight I nearly lost my footing. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? Where were you? I called the house 3 times and… I wasn't home, baby. I'm fine. He pulled back, studying my face in a way that felt less like relief and more like he was searching for something. Wasn't home? At 2 in the morning? Where were you? At a neighbor's. I got a bad feeling and I left. A bad feeling. He repeated it slowly, like he was testing the shape of the words. You just left, based on a feeling. Lavelle, I don't have to explain myself to… I'm not saying that, Ma. He softened his voice. I just need to understand. Who told you to leave? Something in his tone didn't sound like fear for me anymore. It sounded like he needed the answer more than he needed to comfort me. Nobody told me anything. I lied. I just had a feeling. He nodded slowly, watching me a beat too long before his face rearranged itself back into concern. I'm just glad you're safe. He squeezed my hand. You should stay with me for a while. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I don't want anything else to happen to you while I'm not around to protect you. I told myself it was love, all afternoon, long after he left. But that sentence stayed lodged in my chest like a splinter, while I'm not around to protect you. And no matter how many times I turned it over, I couldn't make it sound as gentle as he meant it. I was looking for my reading glasses when I found the receipt. It had slid behind the junk drawer, folded so many times the creases had gone soft. A hardware store receipt, worn soft with age, in Dwayne's handwriting on the back. New locks. Don't tell Elle yet. I sat down at the kitchen table and didn't move for a long time. I didn't understand it then. I do now. It was a Tuesday evening, back when Dwayne was still alive, still healthy, still sitting across from me at this same table with his reading glasses pushed up on his head. Lavelle had come by with the folder, a different one, the first one, before I'd learned to recognize the shape of it. It's just practical, Dad. You and Ma aren't getting any younger. If something happens, I need to be able to act fast. Act fast on what exactly? Dwayne hadn't looked up from his newspaper. We're not dying tomorrow, son. That's not what I… Lavelle had stopped himself, softened his tone the way he always did when pushing got him nowhere. I just want to protect this family. Is that so wrong? Protecting us and controlling us aren't the same thing. Dwayne finally looked at him. I raised you to ask, not to maneuver. Lavelle left that night without the papers signed. I remember being embarrassed telling Dwayne he was being too hard on our son, that Lavelle only wanted to help. Dwayne didn't argue with me. He just got quiet in a way that wasn't like him. Later that week, I found him at his workbench in the garage, changing the locks on the back door himself instead of calling someone. Dwayne, what are you doing? It's nearly 10 o'clock. Just wanted it done. He didn't look up from the screwdriver in his hand. Done for what? Nobody's breaking into a house with locks that already work fine. He was quiet for a moment, turning the screw slower than he needed to. Something's off with him lately, Regina. Who, Lavelle? I laughed a little too quickly. He's just worried about us. He's trying to help. I know what worry looks like. This isn't that. He set the screwdriver down and finally met my eyes. and I remember thinking he looked older in that light than I'd ever seen him. I called an old friend, asked him to keep an eye on some things, just until I understand what's going on. What friend? What things? Don't worry yourself with it yet. I could be wrong. He picked the screwdriver back up. I hope I'm wrong. I let it go. I told myself he was tired, that grief over his own mother's recent passing had made him paranoid, that Lavelle was simply a son trying too hard in his own clumsy way. 2 weeks later, Dwayne was gone, and I buried him without ever asking who that old friend was, or what exactly he'd meant. Sitting at this same table now, receipt in hand, I finally understood what I hadn't let myself see back then. I hope I'm wrong. That was the last real conversation my husband and I ever had about our son. And for 3 months, I'd let myself believe it meant nothing at all. You're telling me you fell asleep in church? Full-grown woman in the third pew, snoring. I did not snore. I swatted his arm across the kitchen table, laughing so hard I had to set my fork down. I closed my eyes during the sermon? That's different. Your neighbor had to nudge you twice, Regina. Patrice exaggerates. It had been 3 weeks since the break-in, and Alton had taken to coming by most evenings, usually with something small. A rotisserie chicken, a bag of peaches. Once a bouquet of grocery store flowers he handed over, like he wasn't sure it was appropriate. That night, it was gumbo he'd made himself, too much cayenne, and I hadn't laughed like that in longer than I wanted to admit. It felt good, dangerous almost, how good it felt. And some part of me kept a careful distance from it even while I laughed. I haven't laughed like this since Dwayne, I said, before I could stop myself. Feels strange saying that out loud. Alton's smile softened into something else. Strange how? Like I'm not supposed to be allowed to feel light again. Not yet. You're allowed, he said quietly. Dwayne would want that for you. You didn't know him well enough to say that. Something crossed his face then, quick, there and gone, like a door opening a crack before someone remembered to shut it. I knew him well enough, he said, and for a second, his eyes dropped to the table instead of meeting mine. Regina, there's something I probably should have told you already about how He stopped himself, mid-sentence. I watched him physically pull it back like he was reeling in a fishing line too fast. About how you what, Alton? You don't get to start a sentence like that and leave it hanging. Nothing. Forget it. He picked his spoon back up, too casual, the kind of casual that doesn't fool anybody who's paying attention. That's not nothing. I know what nothing sounds like, and that wasn't it. I kept my eyes on him, not letting him off as easy as I had other nights. I like you, Alton, but I've had enough surprises this month to last me a lifetime. If there's something to say it. There will be. Soon. I promise you that. He held my gaze, steady, apologetic. It's not the kind of thing I want to say halfway, at a kitchen table, over gumbo. When I tell you, I want to tell you all of it, properly. I didn't love that answer, but something in his face made me let it sit rather than push further that night. Any word from that detective? I asked instead, steering us somewhere I could stand to be. I've got an old contact, Alton said, stirring his gumbo like it needed more attention than it did. Still looking into some things on my end. Nothing solid yet. Your end? What does that mean, your end? You're not police, Alton. What business is this of yours? I know people, from way back. He waved it off too quickly, the way you wave off a question you don't want asked twice. I'll tell you everything, Regina. Just not tonight. I let that be the end of it, though I noted it, filed it away the way you file away a crack in a foundation you're not ready to look at closely yet. He left a little after 9. I walked him to the door, but didn't linger there the way I had other nights. And if he noticed, he didn't say so. There's something I probably should have told you already about how I what? I told myself it was nothing. A man being careful, maybe, guarding something that wasn't ready to be shared. I told myself that all the way up the stairs and into bed. And I didn't quite believe it. Not the way I had before. Marcus Doggett called before 8 in the morning and asked if he could come by. That alone told me something had moved. He sat across from me at the same kitchen table where Alton had left his sentence unfinished the night before, and he didn't waste time getting to it. His name is Terrell Boykins, Marcus said. One of the 2 men we found in your house. He's got a record: assault, breaking, and entering. A few other things going back years. He's not talking. Not talking about what? About why he was in your home. Who sent him? Marcus said it plainly, watching my face while he did. We asked him directly. He gave us nothing. Just sat there, arms crossed, told us we'd have to prove it ourselves. I could picture it without ever having seen it. A man in a gray interview room, jaw set, daring anyone across the table to make him talk. Marcus described him as calm in a way that unsettled the officers more than shouting would have. Not scared, not confused. A man who already knew exactly what he wasn't going to say. So he just sits there, I said. And that's it? That's all we get? Not quite all. Marcus set a folder on the table, but didn't open it yet. We recovered a phone from him at the scene, prepaid. The kind you buy with cash and throw away when you're done. Something in my chest tightened. A burner phone. That's right. He finally opened the folder, sliding a single printed page toward me. Rows of times and numbers. Nothing that meant anything to me on its own. There's call activity on it from the hours before the break-in. 2 calls, both short. Both to the same number. Whose number? We don't know yet. It's registered to a name that doesn't check out. Fake information. Probably paid for the same way the phone was. He tapped the page. But we're working on tracing where that number was purchased and pulling tower records to see where it was when those calls came through. I stared at the timestamps like they might rearrange themselves into something I could understand. So somebody called him. Twice. Right before it happened. Right before, Marcus confirmed. Which tells us this wasn't random. Whoever called him knew exactly when to make that call. And you can't tell who. Not yet. These things take time to trace properly, Mrs. Corwin. I know that's not what you want to hear. I sat with that a long moment, turning the page toward the light like it would give something up if I stared hard enough. 2 calls. A window of time. Someone who knew precisely when 2 armed men needed to be told it was time to move. The second call, Marcus said, almost as an afterthought, tapping the last line on the page, came in at 1:54 a.m. I did the math without meaning to. Alton had called me at 2:03, 9 minutes. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't let my face show what my mind had just quietly lined up. 2 numbers sitting 9 minutes apart, one of them belonging to a stranger who'd known my husband's name before I ever told him. Marcus gathered his folder and stood to leave, telling me he'd be in touch the moment the trace came back. I walked him to the door and thanked him, and the whole time, that 9-minute gap sat in my chest, like something I wasn't ready to hold. Lavelle came by 4 times that week, 4 times in 7 days, more than he'd visited in the whole month before the break-in combined. I brought groceries, he said, Tuesday, setting bags on my counter I hadn't asked for. And I picked up your mail from the box, You shouldn't be walking out there alone right now. Lavelle, it's broad daylight. I can get my own mail. Humor me, Ma. He was already unpacking the bags, arranging things in my cabinets the way he liked them, not the way I did. Until we know who did this, I need to know you're being careful. By Thursday, the visits had a rhythm to them, and the rhythm always circled back to the same place, though he'd gotten smoother about it, wrapping it in enough concern that I almost missed it each time. Have you thought any more about the paperwork? He asked, settling into Dwayne's old chair at the table like it belonged to him now. The power of attorney. It would make things so much simpler, especially now with everything you're going through. Simpler for who? For you, Ma. So somebody's looking after things while you heal from all this. That's all I want. What does looking after things mean, exactly? Just being able to help if you need it. Handling the small stuff so you don't have to think about it. He said it lightly, almost bored, like it barely mattered to him either way. But his eyes stayed steady on mine, a beat too long, and I noticed, the way you notice a draft in a room that's supposed to be sealed. I didn't understand it, not fully, but something in the way he always circled back to this same offer, dressed a little differently each time, sat wrong in a way I couldn't yet name. That night, after he left, I did something I hadn't before. I pulled out a notebook I kept for grocery lists and started a new page. Tuesday, groceries, mail, POA again. Thursday, POA again. Asked twice. Small things. Dates, what he said, how he said it. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. I just knew I didn't trust my own memory to hold the pattern the way paper would. Alton came by that evening, later than usual, and I found myself telling him about the visits without quite meaning to. Lavelle's questions, the folder still sitting in my drawer, the way my son's concern always seemed to circle back to the same request, no matter how I answered it. Alton listened carefully, quieter than his usual self. Does he ever say why it matters so much to him? Specifically? Not really. Just that he wants to help. Why? No reason. But he was watching me in a way that felt different from his usual warmth. Careful. Weighing something. Just strikes me as a lot of visits over one piece of paper. I thought about the 9 minutes I still hadn't found the courage to ask him about directly. And for a moment, I wondered if I was foolish to be sitting here confiding in him at all. When I still didn't fully know what he wasn't telling me either, I let the thought pass. He was kind to me. Lavelle was my blood. Surely I could tell the difference between the two men in my life without needing proof of either. Alton left a little before 10, and I sat alone afterward with my notebook open on the table. 3 entries deep now. Lavelle's same request, written out in 3 slightly different sets of words. I told myself I was just being careful. I was getting good at telling myself that, too. I hadn't touched Dwayne's file box since the funeral. It sat on the top shelf of our closet, gathering dust, filled with things I wasn't ready to sort. Old tax returns, warranty papers for appliances long since replaced, the kind of dull paperwork a marriage accumulates without either person noticing. I finally pulled it down that Saturday, telling myself I needed the deed to prove ownership for the insurance claim on the break-in. That was the reason I gave myself. I'm not sure it was the true one. Near the bottom, beneath a stack of old bank statements, I found a manila folder I didn't recognize. Inside was a document, several pages, typed and formal, with blank lines waiting for signatures that had never come. Durable power of attorney. Principal, Dwayne Corwin. Agent, Lavelle Corwin. My hands went still. This wasn't the folder Lavelle had brought to my kitchen table after his father died. This one was dated long before that, back when Dwayne was still alive, still healthy, still sitting across from me every evening. Someone had drafted this long before I ever knew there was anything to draft. tucked behind it was something I hadn't expected. A letter from a title company, addressed to Dwayne, thanking him for his recent inquiry about a preliminary title search on our home. Dwayne had never called any title company in his life. He handled the mortgage, the taxes, everything about that house, personally, the old-fashioned way. Someone had used his name to start asking questions about our deed without ever telling him. I sat on the floor of our closet and read every page. Somewhere near the end of the POA, in Dwayne's own handwriting, scrawled in the margin next to the signature line, "Not yet. Need to think. Not yet." He'd never gotten the chance to think longer than that. I called Marcus before I'd even decided to. He came by within the hour. I'd expected him to glance at it, maybe nod, tell me it was worth noting. Instead, he read through both documents slowly, twice, his expression going somewhere I couldn't follow. "This title company letter. Did your husband ever mention starting this process?" "Never. He would have told me. We didn't keep secrets about the house." So somebody initiated a title search using his information, and he never authorized it. Marcus set both documents down carefully, like they might tear if he moved too fast. I'd seen him careful before, controlled, choosing his words. This was different. This was a man doing math in his head and not liking the answer. "Mrs. Corwin, I'd like to take both of these into evidence, if you're willing." "Evidence for what, Marcus? A form that was never signed and a letter about a deed search?" "Maybe more than that." He met my eyes, something in his face sharper now, more focused, like a piece of a puzzle had just clicked behind his eyes. "I'd rather not say more until I've had a chance to look into a few things." That's not an answer. I know it isn't. He slid both documents carefully into a folder of his own. "I promise you, the moment I can tell you more, I will." I walked him to the door, and just before he stepped out, I asked him plainly, "Marcus, does this mean something?" "Really?" He paused on my porch step, folder tucked under his arm. "I think it might mean a great deal," he said quietly. "I just need to be sure before I say anything else." He left without another word, and I stood in my doorway a long time after his car pulled away, holding on to the strange, unsettled feeling that I had just handed him something far heavier than paper. I'd taken to sitting at the kitchen table with my phone face up in front of me, like staring at it hard enough might make it ring. It never worked. It just sat there, screen dark, while I aged another hour waiting on news nobody seemed ready to give me. I didn't spend the full 2 weeks doing only that, though it felt that way some days. I called my bank and had them flag my accounts, adding a second layer of verification Lavelle wouldn't be able to talk his way around. I sat across from an estate attorney Marcus had quietly recommended, a careful woman who reviewed everything I'd found in Dwayne's file box and told me plainly, "Whatever happens with the criminal side of this, you need your own affairs protected regardless." I left her office with a short list of things to change: beneficiaries, account access, the deed itself. And I did every one of them within the week, methodically, the way Dwayne would have wanted me to. It didn't make the waiting easier. It just gave the waiting something to stand on, besides fear. A knock came around 4 one afternoon, sharp enough to make me jump clean out of the chair. I opened the door to find a delivery man holding a package for the house 2 doors down, apologizing for the mix-up before he'd even finished reading the label. I stood there in my doorway a full minute after he left, feeling foolish for how fast my heart had been racing over nothing. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since I'd handed Marcus that folder, since his face had gone somewhere I couldn't follow. Marcus called that evening, and I nearly dropped the phone answering it too fast. "Nothing new to report yet, Mrs. Corwin. I just wanted to check in." His voice was steady. careful as ever. The attorneys are still negotiating with Mr. Boykins. We're using the phone records as leverage, trying to get him to cooperate. These things take time. I know that's hard to hear. You said that 2 weeks ago, Marcus. I know I did. So what's actually happening? Is he talking or isn't he? He's considering it. That's genuinely the most I can tell you right now. A pause, careful, like he was measuring how much honesty I could hold. I promise you, the second there's real movement, you'll be the first call I make. Something in me cracked, small and sudden, the exhaustion of weeks finally finding a crack to slip through. I can't keep doing this, Marcus. Sitting here, waiting, not knowing if my own son is… My voice broke off before I could finish the sentence out loud. I'm sorry. That's not fair to put on you. It's all right, Mrs. Corwin. You're allowed that. No, I mean it. You've been nothing but patient with me, and here I am snapping like a woman who's lost her manners. You haven't lost anything, he said gently. You're just tired. There's a difference. I apologized twice more before we hung up, embarrassed at myself the whole time. That night, when Lavelle called asking if I needed anything from the store, I told him no. Thank you. I was fine. And I didn't offer anything further. I didn't tell him about the folder, or the attorney, or the accounts I'd quietly locked down. I didn't tell him anything at all anymore. My phone rang at 11:40 the next morning while I was folding laundry at the kitchen table. Marcus's name lit up the screen, and I answered before the second ring finished. Marcus? There was a pause before he spoke, brief but unmistakable. And when his voice came through, it didn't sound like the careful, measured man I'd grown used to these past weeks. Mrs. Corwin, he said, and something in the way he said my name made the laundry slip clean out of my hands. I need you to sit down. Sit down, Marcus said again, gentler this time, and I realized I was still standing in my kitchen with laundry scattered at my feet. I sat. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I pressed them flat against the table to make them stop. Terrell Boykins gave a statement this morning, Marcus said. Full cooperation, in exchange for a reduced sentence. He named the person who hired him and his partner to break into your home. Who? The word came out smaller than I meant it to. Marcus didn't answer right away, and in that silence, my mind did something ugly and fast. It reached, for one brief, shameful second, toward Alton. The 9 minutes, the porch light. All of it flickered through me at once, a wild, desperate hope that it could be him instead, that it could be anyone instead. Your son, Marcus said. Lavelle. The kitchen went very quiet. That's not, I started and stopped, because I didn't have an end to that sentence that made any sense. Marcus, that's not possible. He's my son. He came to my house that morning. He hugged me. He was scared for me. I saw his face. I understand this is hard to hear. You don't understand anything. You're telling me my own child hired 2 armed men to… I couldn't finish it. Mrs. Corwin, I wouldn't bring this to you off one man's word alone. He slid a folder toward me, the same careful way he'd handled Dwayne's papers weeks earlier. We pulled cell tower records for the number that called Terrell twice that night. It puts a phone matching your son's carrier account within a quarter mile of a gas station off Route 80 both times. The same gas station where surveillance footage shows Lavelle's truck parked 20 minutes before each call, meeting briefly with a man matching Terrell's description. That could still be… There's more. The hardware store where your husband bought those new locks keeps records on their key-cutting system. A duplicate for that exact lock was cut a few weeks after Dwayne passed, paid for with a card in your son's name. And the title company inquiry you found, the one your husband never made, was placed from an office computer registered to your son's employer. Marcus laid it out plainly, no theatrics, letting each piece sit before adding the next. The key that let those men in without forcing anything. The phone that told them when to move. The paperwork trying to move your house out of your name before anyone got hurt. None of it stands alone, Mrs. Corwin. Together, it's a case. I stared at the folder without opening it. I didn't need to see the pages to know he was telling me the truth. Marcus wasn't a man who brought half-built cases to a grieving mother's kitchen table. Why? I whispered. Why would he do this to me? That's part of what we're still working to understand fully. But Mrs. Corwin? He hesitated, genuinely uncertain how to say what came next. This may connect to more than just the break-in. I have to ask you to prepare yourself for that. More than the break-in. What does that mean? I'll explain everything I can soon. Right now, I need to focus on what happens next. He closed the folder gently, like it weighed more than paper should. We're preparing a warrant for your son's arrest. It could happen as early as today. The room tilted slightly, the way it does when the ground you've stood on your whole life quietly stops being solid. Today, I repeated. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Before it happens. Before anyone else can tell you. I sat there long after he left, staring at the folder he'd left behind, my son's face from that morning after the break-in replaying over and over. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm just glad you're safe. Every word of it now sounding like something rehearsed. Lavelle was arrested at 6:15 that evening, at his office, without incident. Marcus told me himself, standing in my doorway with his hat in his hands like a man delivering news he wished belonged to someone else. There's more you need to know, he said, once I'd let him in. Once I'd sat back down at the table that had held every hard conversation of the past month. Under questioning, Terrell mentioned something. Said Lavelle made a comment to him once, bragging almost, about how easy it had been the last time. The last time. I heard myself say it flat, already knowing where it led before Marcus finished. We believe he was referring to your husband's death. Marcus said it as gently as words like that could be said. Combined with the timing, Dwayne's death coming so soon after he started pushing that power of attorney, the note he left unsigned. It's enough for us to formally reopen the case as a homicide. I sat very still. Somewhere in the weeks since the break-in, I'd let myself believe the worst thing my son had done was try to hurt me. I hadn't let myself finish the thought that came after, that maybe he'd already succeeded once before. He killed his father, I said, testing the words, waiting to see if they'd break me. They didn't, not the way I expected. Something colder settled in instead. This isn't one crime, is it, Marcus? It's two. I believe so, yes. He stayed another hour, walking me through what came next. The exhumation request. The new forensic review. The slow machinery of a case reopening after months of assuming there was nothing to find. Alton came by after Marcus left, later than usual. Quiet, in a way that matched the hollowed-out feeling sitting in my chest. Marcus called me too, he said, settling across from me. Told me they're reopening Dwayne's case. You knew something was wrong with him, I said. Not a question. Before any of this happened, didn't you? He didn't answer right away. He looked at his hands, the way a man looks when he's deciding how much of the truth he can afford to spend. I'd had concerns, he said finally. About Lavelle. For months before your husband passed, if I'm honest with you. Months? And you never said anything to me. There wasn't anything solid enough to say. He met my eyes, something careful there, held back behind the honesty he was giving me. I promise you, Regina, Everything I've done since has been trying to make sure nothing like what happened to Dwayne happened to you too. That night you called me. Tell me exactly how it went. I made myself ask it, finally, after weeks of swallowing the question. How did you know to move that fast? Marcus got a tip that evening that something was happening at your address. He called me because I'd flagged concerns about Lavelle to him before. I didn't just take his word and dial your number blind. I drove past your street first. Saw a car parked down from your house that didn't belong to anyone on that block. That's when I called 911 and you, back to back, same breath. 9 minutes between Marcus's call and yours, because I spent most of it driving, not deciding. He said it plainly, without hesitation, and something in my chest finally loosened that I hadn't realized I'd been holding so tight. But even as the relief settled, I noticed the way his jaw stayed tight, his eyes drifting toward the window instead of staying on mine. There's something else, isn't there? I said. Something you're still not telling me. Alton was quiet a long moment. Not yet, he said. Soon. I promise you. Soon. Marcus called at noon to tell me they were sitting Lavelle down with everything. The phone records, Terrell's statement, the unsigned power of attorney, his father's reopened case. I wanted you to know it's happening, he said. I can't tell you what's said in that room, but I wanted you to hear it from me that the conversation is underway. I thanked him and hung up, and then I did the only thing left to do. I waited. I moved through my house that afternoon like a woman underwater, but not an idle one. I called the estate attorney to confirm the last of the paperwork on my accounts had gone through. The beneficiary changes, the deed protections. Small, deliberate acts I could still control while everything else sat out of my hands. I checked the locks Dwayne had once changed alone in the dark, and for the first time understood exactly why he'd done it that way, quietly, without asking permission from anyone. Some small, stubborn part of me kept circling back to a version of this where Marcus called again and told me it was all a misunderstanding. I let myself hold that hope for exactly as long as it took to finish one phone call. Then I set it down, because I'd already done everything I knew how to do to protect myself, and there was nothing left of that hope worth carrying further. Alton came by around 4 and didn't say much. He sat with me at the table, didn't reach for conversation, didn't try to fill the silence with comfort I couldn't use anyway. Just his presence, steady, while the clock on my kitchen wall ticked through the longest afternoon of my life. You don't have to talk, he said once quietly. I'm not going anywhere. I appreciated that more than I could say. Marcus called again a little after 6. I picked up before the first ring finished. Where are we? I asked. No greeting, no patience left for one. He's still in there, Marcus said. I'll tell you honestly, Mrs. Corwin. When we laid it out for him, all of it together, his composure didn't hold the way it has this whole time. He started contradicting himself. Small things. Where he was that night, who he'd spoken to, when he last saw Terrell. Things that didn't line up with what he told us before. But he hasn't said it. No, not yet. Not yet, I repeated. And something about hearing those 2 words again, in that order, made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. Dwayne had said the same thing once, standing in our garage with a screwdriver in his hand. I hope I'm wrong. Lavelle's whole life, it seemed, had been built on the space between suspicion and confession, and here I was again, waiting in that same unbearable gap. Though I noticed, sitting there, that I was no longer waiting with empty hands. I know this is hard, Marcus said. I promise, the moment there's anything more, you'll hear it from me first. You keep promising me that, because I intend to keep it. I sat at my kitchen table long after we hung up, Alton across from me, The house so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming in the next room. Somewhere across town, my son was sitting with the weight of everything he'd done pressing down on him. And still, after everything, he hadn't said the words out loud. I didn't know, sitting there, whether I wanted him to break or whether some small, foolish part of me was still praying he wouldn't have anything to break over at all. The silence stretched on, unanswered. And I understood for the first time that not knowing might be its own kind of cruelty. Worse, almost, than whatever truth was waiting on the other side of it. Marcus came to my house himself that night instead of calling. I understood the difference before he even sat down. Some news is too heavy to hand over through a phone line. He confessed, Marcus said. No preamble, because he knew by now I didn't want one. To everything. I sat down across from him at the table, the same table that had carried every hard truth of this past month, and I made myself ask the question I already knew the answer to. Both of them? Both. He admitted to hiring Terrell Boykins and a second man to break into your home. The intent was never robbery. Marcus's voice stayed level, but I could hear the effort it took him to keep it that way. It was made to look like a burglary gone wrong. He wanted it to end the same way it looked like it did with your husband. And Dwayne. Tell me exactly, Marcus. I need to hear it plainly. He was quiet a moment, then gave it to me straight, the way I'd asked. Your husband was on blood pressure medication. Lavelle had Terrell swap several pills in that bottle for something that would drop his pressure too fast, cause dizziness, disorientation. He knew your husband went down to the basement most evenings to check the water heater. Terrell was paid to be sure Dwayne took the swap dose that night, then leave. Your husband fell down those stairs on his own after that. Nobody had to push him. The medical examiner had no reason to run toxicology on a man his age with an existing heart condition, so it was ruled an accidental fall. I sat with that a long moment. My husband, dead, 4 months now. Killed not by bad luck, but by a pill bottle he trusted because it sat in his own medicine cabinet. Why? I asked. Not just how. Why? He told investigators your husband had recently changed the beneficiary paperwork on 2 accounts, cutting Lavelle's access significantly, and was talking about redoing the will entirely once the power of attorney issue settled. Lavelle said, in his words, that his father was about to shut him out for good. He believed if Dwayne died before any of that took effect, the estate would default to you, and he could manage it through you instead, through the very document he kept asking you to sign. He tried to do the same thing to me, because I wouldn't sign either. That appears to be exactly it. Yes. I thought of the folder still sitting in my kitchen drawer, months old now, untouched. I thought of Lavelle's voice that morning after the break-in. You hurt. Did they touch you? I'm just glad you're safe. Every syllable of it now revealed as performance, rehearsed concern from a man who already knew exactly what he'd sent into my house the night before. What happens now? I asked, needing something solid to hold on to. With a confession this complete, the prosecution will move toward a plea agreement rather than a full trial. It spares everyone months of proceedings, and it locks in the maximum sentence without risk. Given the nature of both crimes, they'll be seeking life. Life, I repeated. Very likely, yes. I nodded slowly, feeling something settle in my chest that wasn't relief, exactly, but wasn't only grief either. The particular ache of losing a husband and a son in the same breath. One to a lie I'd believed for 4 months. The other to a truth I'd never wanted to know. When will I know it's finished? Really finished. These things take longer than people expect, even with a confession. Months, likely, before sentencing. I'll walk you through every step of it. Marcus stood to leave. I'll be there with you, if you want me to be. I'd like that. He left not long after, and I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time, holding two losses that had somehow turned out to be the same loss all along. 4 months had passed since Lavelle's arrest by the time we stood in that courtroom. 4 months of continuances and paperwork, and Marcus warning me gently, more than once, that justice moves slower than grief wants it to. The courtroom was colder than I expected, though I suspect that had less to do with the air conditioning than with what I'd come there to witness. I wore the navy dress Dwayne always liked, the one I hadn't put on since his funeral. Marcus sat beside me on the hard wooden bench, close enough that his presence steadied me without either of us needing to say why. Lavelle sat across the room in a county jumpsuit beside his attorney. He'd accepted a plea agreement weeks earlier, guilty on all counts, in exchange for the state not pursuing the death penalty on his father's murder. He didn't look like a monster. That was the hardest part. He looked like my son, tired and thinner than I remembered, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Before sentencing, the judge asked if the victim wished to speak. Marcus squeezed my hand once as I stood. I hadn't written anything down. I hadn't trusted myself to. My husband trusted his son with everything he had, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And that trust is what killed him. I don't stand here asking for vengeance. I stand here asking this court to understand that what my son took wasn't property or money or a house. He took a father from a family, and he tried to take a mother the same way. I have had to learn, at 61 years old, how to be afraid in my own home. No sentence gives that back to me. But I'd like to know that no one else's mother has to learn it the way I did. Lavelle never turned around to find me. I don't know if that was shame or simply the absence of anything left to say. In consideration of the severity and premeditated nature of these crimes, the judge finally said, and pursuant to the negotiated plea, this court sentences the defendant to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Life. The word landed and didn't shatter me the way I'd braced for. It simply settled, heavy and final, into a place I'd already made room for over these 4 long months. The judge added one more note before adjourning. That under Alabama law, a person convicted of causing a parent's death forfeits any right to inherit from that parent's estate. Whatever Lavelle had wanted from his father, the law had just made certain he would never touch a cent of it. Outside on the courthouse steps, Marcus stood with me while I caught my breath in the afternoon air. "You did good in there," he said. That statement took real courage. I didn't feel brave. Brave isn't a feeling, Mrs. Corwin. It's what you do anyway. I thanked him for everything, and he told me to call him if I ever needed anything, then walked toward his car, leaving me alone on those cold marble steps. Alton was waiting by mine. "How are you?" he asked, though it sounded like he already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. "It's done," I said. "He's gone. It's really done." "Good." His jaw stayed tight, and he glanced away toward the courthouse steps like he was bracing himself for something. "Regina, there's something I need to tell you. Now that this part is finally over." "Alton, you're scaring me a little." "I know." He met my eyes, and for the first time since the grocery store, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. "Can we sit somewhere? I don't want to say this standing in a parking lot." We sat in a small diner 2 blocks from the courthouse, a corner booth away from the lunchtime crowd, and Alton wrapped both hands around a coffee cup he never drank from. "My real name is still Alton Winford," he started. "That part was never a lie. But I wasn't just a man who happened to notice you at the grocery store, Regina. I need you to know that first, before anything else." My stomach tightened, bracing for something I couldn't yet name. I'm a private investigator, have been for close to 20 years. He watched my face carefully, like he expected the words to land as a blow. Dwayne hired me. About 2 weeks before he died. Hired you? I repeated it slowly, letting it settle. For what? He came to me worried about Lavelle. Said something felt off. He didn't have proof. Just instinct. He wanted someone to look into it quietly. And the grocery store. That wasn't an accident either, was it? No. I'd been trying to find a way to get close to you, to understand what you knew without frightening you. I sat back against the booth, needing the distance more than I wanted to admit. So, every dinner, every evening you sat at my table, I was a piece of an investigation to you. Not for long, maybe the first week. After that, it stopped being about Lavelle entirely. He reached toward me, then stopped himself, hand resting flat on the table instead. I know that doesn't erase how it started. No, I said. It doesn't. I let the silence sit there a while, watching him hold still under the weight of it, not rushing to comfort himself with an easy ending. Part of me wanted to be angrier than I was. Part of me knew I'd earned the right to take my time deciding how angry that should be. Why didn't you tell me? Once we were close. Once I trusted you with things I hadn't told anyone. Because I was a coward about it, if I'm honest. I told myself I was protecting you from an accusation I couldn't prove yet. But some of it was just fear of losing you before I ever earned the right to keep you. He finally met my eyes fully. I'm not asking you to forgive that tonight. I just needed you to hear the truth from me, all of it, before anyone else could hand you a version of it. That's a fair thing to want, I said. It's not the same as being ready to give it to you. I know. I thought about the porch light, the 9 minutes, a man who'd carried a dead friend's worry quietly for all these months without once asking for credit. And I thought, too, about how much of my life these last months had been shaped by men deciding what I needed to know and when. Dwayne, protecting me with silence. Lavelle, controlling me with lies. And now Alton, however gently, doing a version of the same thing. I appreciate what you did, I said carefully. I don't know yet what I feel about how you did it. I need time, Alton. Not an answer today. Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. I nodded, and we sat a while longer without either of us reaching for the other's hand. Walking out of that diner alone, I understood something I hadn't let myself sit with until now. I'd survived losing a husband, surviving my own son's betrayal, and I'd done the hardest parts of it standing on my own 2 feet, not because a man warned me in time, but because I chose every single time to get up and keep walking. Whatever I decided about Alton, that part of myself wasn't his to give me. It was already mine.